it doesn't have to be some huge lift, hours consuming time, energy of your day. It can be the smallest gesture. And it could be every week, I want to make sure I give my family X amount of time. That 50% of your generosity should be geared towards other people and 50% should be towards yourself. You cannot give from an empty well. What is being generous to yourself is anything that moves you towards the person you want to be.
Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about generosity and why it's important to you.
Certainly. Well, I have had a career in which I very much believe in what we give to others, what we do for others, and what we do for ourselves, right? Because we can't have one without the other. And I think that's often misunderstood. And I recently co-authored a book about generosity. It was really a gift to me, to be honest, that my co-author is the person who had the idea. His name is Monty Wood. And so Monty is an absolute genius when it comes to business and corporate culture. And he, in his career, had realized that the reason he was so successful is because he built teams that knew he really cared. He's authentically generous with them, with his time, with his energy, with his wisdom, his knowledge. And because of that, he's successful. But it was a little bit anecdotal. And so he actually came to me and we met, we partnered, and he said, I want to put some science behind this. And I said, absolutely.
Hey there, if you'd like to support this show and help us continue producing this kind of content, please visit startwithvalues.com. There's a link in the show notes, and pre-order my forthcoming book. It's packed full of tools, insights, techniques to help you live a values-aligned life, to reduce stress, increase fulfillment, and it makes a great gift. So perhaps it's something you could share with someone else who you care about. That would mean the absolute world to me. Thank you again, and all the best. Let's get back to the episode.
And to be honest, I didn't realize where we would go with this. I started digging into the research and the science behind generosity. What we all know, I've worked in nonprofits all over the world. I'm a doctor of public health, which for me at least, like there's nothing more giving of oneself than to constantly care about others and how they are functioning in the world and how to make them happier and healthier. But to spend dedicated time digging into the research and the data of what happens in our brains and the cascading events of what happens in our bodies when we're truly generous, which is giving with no expectation of return. When we give of ourselves, our time, our energy, whatever it is, and we just let it go out in the world, what happens to us? And then that karmic effect of what comes back. And it never occurred to me until Monty entered my life that you could look at data. You could start finding measurements for such things. And I was, absolutely obsessed. After that, it just became, my career, my passion. So generosity, someone was generous with me. Many people have been. But in this case, they were generous with me with their ideas, their thoughts, and it catapulted us into this entirely new space.
Fascinating. And before your interest in generosity, perhaps you could share a little bit about your own journey.
Well, it wasn't linear, that's for sure. So my background is in neuroscience, and I became a doctor of public health. And so I love to obsess over people, how they think, how they behave, why we do the things that we do. And throughout my career, where I've really been happiest is connecting people. And so, in fact, I actually wrote my dissertation on public-private partnerships, how you build alliances and bring people who oftentimes don't speak the same language together to do something where 1 and 1 equals 50, not 2. And that became a lot of other things, because when you really focus on how people behave and how you build partnerships, how you collaborate.
Hey there, Brad here, and this is not an ad. This is me saying thank you for connecting with this podcast. I would like to offer you a free gift. If you visit bradleyhook.com/gift, you'll find something very special there just for you. Now back to the episode.
It's not limited to business. That it becomes how communities function. It becomes how we improve our households. Again, how we become happier, healthier people. And I spent most of my career now in healthcare, but I would really say in the nonprofit space, helping nonprofits develop, grow, improve. Because the people who work in the nonprofit space, they're there out of passion. They want to make a difference in the world. And to me, those are the absolute best people to work with and to help, because you know that the work goes out into the world and again, it has that same sort of ripple effect, right? It keeps spreading the good.
It does, yeah. Yeah. In my experience, there are some of the most wonderful people, and they also have a tendency to burn themselves out. Maybe that's something we can talk about later, because it's so purpose driven that they sometimes forget about the importance of self-care, just literally taking a break sometimes. Why is generosity a secret superpower? How could it revolutionize life and business?
I'm glad you asked, because when we wrote the book, title often comes last in the process, or close to last. And we really struggled with, what do we call the book? And so we ended up calling it Generosity Wins. And for us, it's true. It wins. It wins as an individual, as a community, as a family, as a world. Like, we win when we're generous. But the subtitle to what you just said is how and why this game-changing superpower drives our success. And I worried the word superpower was a little cheesy. But the truth is, we chose it very intentionally because we are the only species on Earth that is truly generous. And I looked at a lot of primate data, which people will often point to, because we'll see behavior in primates where they will share their food, they will do other things that are community-based, right? They'll do it for their tribe. But they will just as easily kill a male that comes in from a different community or tribe when he tries to infiltrate theirs. Whereas humans, we will give, we will mentor, we'll donate, whatever it is, our time, again, our energy, our money, to people we'll never meet. We'll never know the recipient of the acts that we do. And this is a space where one of the chapters of the book, we actually interviewed a person who is an expert in technology. And we hear so much negative about technology today and the impact it has.
Hey, Brad here. Would you believe that around 70% of the people who watch this podcast have not yet subscribed? It would mean the world to us if you click that subscribe button on whichever platform you use, so that we can stay connected with you and you'll receive notifications when we add new episodes. We really appreciate you coming and connecting with us and being part of our community. So all the best.
But it was so fascinating to talk to someone who also said, even something as simple as like a tutorial video on YouTube, you're putting something out that helps others. You'll never know, right? You may teach someone to tie a tie. You don't know that it actually helped them get that job, right? They had never had someone help them with that. Like, simple gestures and acts that we put out in the world, we do it to be kind to others, to be generous with others. And we ask nothing in return. We don't see the return. We don't get a thank you letter. We are the only species on Earth that really gives with no expectation of return. It's actually a superpower of ours.
When people think of generosity, do they sometimes confuse it? Or how would you describe the difference, or maybe there's no difference between, say, generosity, kindness, altruism? Are they all expressing that same core principle, which is giving without expectation?
I think they are all versions of generosity.
Yeah.
And so we redefined it in the book, which I've already said it a couple of times. There are limitless ways to be generous because it is giving with no expectation of return. That can be an act of kindness. It can be a donation. It can be anything you want it to be. It can be as simple as a smile. And I know that also sounds a little cheesy, But we've all been in a position where someone can just smile and just a little bit of support. And it's what you needed in that moment to keep going or to feel like, I got this, right? Like, it could be the most generous thing that you do. It doesn't have to be a grand gesture. And so I really think all these other things are under that umbrella of generosity. It is a word that we misuse a lot, which is why it was so important for us to redefine it. Because particularly in English-speaking countries, what we found is the word is often associated with, earlier I said, a donor dollar. It's like someone was generous. They gave to this organization, or they gave a gift to this university, or they were generous. When in reality, my belief is the most generous thing you can give is your time. You'll never get it back. But to spend time with, it could be your family, right? To be intentional about, I want to be more generous with my family. I want to spend an extra whatever with them. I don't call my dad enough. That one's very personal. I don't call my dad enough. I want to be intentional about being more generous with my dad and just giving him that time to listen, to talk. Mentorship is another one. To be able to take all the wisdom, all the things that live in here and help someone else learn from that experience, grow from it, open a door for them. People often say, like, reach back and pull someone else up. Those, to me, are by far the most generous things you can do, because it involves giving of yourself in a way that no one else can. No one else can give exactly what you do the way you do.
It's so true. And you see many of the world's most successful people, they achieve a certain level of success, however that's defined, usually financially. And the first thing that they start doing is giving it away, because that's where fulfillment comes. That's where meaning comes. And you don't have to wait until you're a billionaire. I guess you can start doing it right now by contacting your dad or your mum. I commit to doing that as well. It's something I need to do more, is call my mum. So there we go. I've put it out into the world.
Now you heard it.
Yeah, exactly. In the business context, it's very much about, well, the old paradigm was profit first, relationships, well, keep emotions out of it most of the time. And I see things shifting. In fact, well, firstly, I read the first chapter of Generosity Wins. It's fantastic. The link will be in the show notes so people can go and get their own copy. And it's a story about how business is changing, how someone was appraised, not by financial performance, but actually by what they did. And I was in a conversation with a consulting firm recently, and the person said, it's not just about what we achieve. We're changing to measure how we achieved it. What was the impact on each other, on our stakeholders, on team members? From your perspective, do you think this is a shift that we're seeing happen organically, or are people just becoming more conscious?
I think there's a lot of forces at play here. And you bring up a good point. So something about our book that is different, I think, than a lot of books is it's actually written as a business fable. And when we first had this concept, I honestly, I had a really hard time wrapping my head around it. And I don't know what I thought the book was, but I didn't think it was a fable about a made-up person. But what sets it apart is our main character. Her name's Emily. But she is a made-up character, but she goes on this journey, and every single person she interviews in the book is a real person. And in fact, we added a QR code at the end of each chapter, so you can hover over it and it'll take you to their LinkedIn. So everyone you meet on this journey, and you hear their story, and you see her arc, right, of what she learns about the true meaning of generosity and how to bring it into this global company she works in. It comes from real people and real experiences, but none of them are made up. But that said, I think we're seeing multiple things happen at once. I think we're seeing, at least my experience, I know a lot of people are like, oh, kids today. But I think young people today they are so thoughtful in terms of the questions they ask. They want to know where something comes from, how it was made, who was involved. And they are so good about, if something, they don't see it as ethical, like, they'll shift, they'll walk away. So I feel like we have young people who are holding brands accountable now in a very different way. We have competition all around. And so companies are taking on, they call it different things: corporate responsibility, social responsibility, social impact. But we're seeing a real behavior change in companies. And sometimes I think it's just lip service. Like, we have to care about whatever the hot topic of the moment is, right? And there for a while, I felt like around early COVID days, every few weeks, days, maybe, it felt like we were getting an email like, our company stands firm on this, our company supports that. Or it's like everyone felt like they had to put their flag in the ground about, we're good people, right? They had to like yell it at your inbox or something. But but I also think there's something real there. There are companies and people and organizations who really said, this matters. And in fact, we will no longer allow X to happen. Or as a company, we want to make sure we support Y, because it makes all of us better. It makes our team feel better. It makes them, we heard them. They care about this. They're passionate about this. And we're not only going to speak it, we're going to put our company behind it. And so I think there's a lot of shifting forces, and I think it's wonderful that we collectively and individually are holding companies more accountable. And to the point I made earlier about how I met Monty and his experiences, what Monty really saw was the ROI of being generous. He's literally the most generous human I've ever met in my life. I can say that now, having interviewed everyone in the book and done lots of work all over the world. He is so giving of his time and his knowledge. And he's the kind of person that, he's never been my boss, but I know for a fact, even as a co-author, like, when he asks how you are, it's that question that comes across that, he's not just saying it because it's the right thing to say. He's very intentionally wanting to hear how you are. How's your family? What can I do for you? How do we support you? And what he learned, and what I've learned, and we've heard over and over again through the book, is when you're that kind of person, people will work 10 times harder for you because they buy into your mission and they buy into the corporate mission because they know it's being led by someone who genuinely cares about them as a person and not just the bottom line. But so they'll give you all the energy and skill to make that bottom line grow.
I see that reflected in my own experience when I've worked with, or if I had to reflect back on who I've really admired and who's inspired me along the journey, it is the most generous people who spent the time, who were caring, considerate, had high empathy, and really wanted to, not just wanted you to expend your energy for their benefit, but just wanted you to have a good experience of whatever it was that you were doing too. And it makes a huge difference. And speaking about young people, I have a team of several amazing young people. And when we start off our weekly calls, it really is, how are you? And it's both ways. I mean, I've never heard people describe so many emotions. It's amazing. I'm feeling a little bit of this, and I've got some gratitude for what happened yesterday, and I've got a little bit of apprehension. Oh, wow, this is such a
awesome.
Emotional literacy. It's incredible. But then they turn it around and ask, how am I? Are you sleeping better? Because last week you mentioned that you were, and it's just, there's so much psychological safety and trust. We all know that we've got each other's back, and it just creates this incredible work culture where you love the people that you work with, which you wouldn't have said. I mean, you couldn't have said that 15 years ago. People would have been like, really? You love your employees? What's wrong with you?
Well, I think what you're describing, it's awesome because it also speaks to they care about you in return, right? Like you just described something beautiful. But B, what we're finding over and over is that being generous builds trust, which you just described. And trust is what builds I'm going to do this, but I expect something in return. And you and I both know it. Our BS meters are both kind of, like ringing off of each other. When we're really just honestly curious about others, and especially like you just mentioned, like the follow-up means I heard you're not sleeping well. Are things better? You immediately like, oh, they actually cared. They listened. And you know what? And all of a sudden you find yourself sharing more, and it just builds trust and it bonds you. It's wonderful.
What are some of the so-called soft skills that can support generosity? Can we develop generosity as a competence?
That's a great question. I asked that question. We asked that question of every single person we interviewed. And in fact, in one of the chapters, we interviewed someone who has built schools. And he was one of our last interviews. And we chose him specifically because we didn't feel like we had gotten a really good answer to, can you teach generosity? And so we were so blessed to get to spend time with someone who knows how to answer that question. And I was happy, very happy. He answered yes. And after building schools, mostly for young men, what he described is creating an environment for people who didn't grow up in a space where the environment around them allowed for a lot of generosity, because people did not work, let alone from a place of abundance, right? They were not working from a place where they just could freely give of themselves, their time, their energy, their, whatever, their resources of any kind. And so he very much, the schools he works in and builds are built on, how do we teach that kind of trust? How do we teach men to grow up being generous when they've never had it demonstrated for them in a home environment? And the answer is yes, you can teach it. And what he drove home for us, and we do talk about in the book a little, or a lot, but is starting small. And so earlier I said, like, it could be a smile. We're not asking anyone to donate $1 million. We're not asking them every day to make 10 cakes and go take them to a shelter, or go visit all of your neighbors. It doesn't have to be some huge lift, hours consuming time, energy of your day. It can be the smallest gesture. And it can be every week, I want to make sure I give my family X amount of time. It can be, we're heading, I live in America, so this came to mind, sorry. But like, we're heading towards an election. It could be, I want to give more grace to people as they express their opinions, and I think they're just ridiculous. I live in Washington, D.C., so I'm a little biased. I hear a lot of ridiculous opinions. But it actually is, it works both ways, because you can say, I'm going to be more generous in just giving grace to others. We may disagree, but I don't need to respond. I don't need to say something. The kindest thing I can do is to let them have their opinion, and we continue to be friends, and we just move on, right? And it can be small. And I also want to reiterate that it's not just about what you do for others. It is also about doing for yourself. And in fact, we encourage a 50-50 split, that 50% of your generosity should be geared towards other people, and 50% should be towards yourself. You cannot give from an empty well. And for me, speaking of small things, I have a toddler who's very energetic. And one of the things I've been doing is, it's like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, I go outside. It's a small thing. And honestly, most of the time these days, it's when he goes to daycare, we're close enough that I walk him, and I slowly walk home, or I slowly walk when I go to pick him up at the end of the day, because I've had a very stressful work day. I want to greet him. I can't put it all away, right? We don't actually compartmentalize it away, where we shut a door and we pretend that it didn't happen. But that time outside right now It is the most generous thing I can do for myself, is a few minutes to just see the sun, take a deep breath, and just sort of let as much of the BS from the day go as I can. And I honestly believe, in turn, it's the most generous thing I can do for him. Because even if I'm just letting a tiny piece of the stress go, I'm doing it for him, so that the moment we see each other, I'm a better person than I was before he saw me. And you really can teach it. Our brains are plastic. It is about repetition. And so we encourage people, we keep it simple, like a 30-day challenge, with the goal of, 30 days, your brain can change. You can really start strengthening and carving out those new pathways. And every day, do one thing for someone else and one thing for yourself. Super simple, super small. If you want to, write it down, because what you start to find is that reflection allows you to sort of see how it cascaded through your feelings or through your day. But it's something as small as a month. It takes about 2 weeks for us to start to develop a habit or to break a habit. So at a month in, your brain actually starts to get it and it becomes more natural. And so you'll all of a sudden find that daily act of generosity becomes easier and more ingrained. And the next thing you know, you don't even think about it.
I like the 50-50 split, because there is always the risk of overstretching yourself. Even though generosity is wonderful, if you're just give, you could end up just like empathy, in empathic distress, a kind of generosity distress, because you've left nothing else for yourself in that well. So having a rough 50-50 split is it's a really nice way just to measure, am I looking after myself as much as caring for others? Put on your oxygen mask.
Yeah,
kind of
exactly
idea.
right. And it's something people hear all the time, which is, you can't help those around you until you can breathe, right? If you pass out, you can't help anybody. So it's true. It really is true. We have to care for ourselves. And that doesn't mean anything extreme, right? In fact, we in the book talk about, overindulgence is not being generous with yourself. Going to extremes, immediate gratification type thing, like, that's not being generous. What is being generous to yourself is anything that moves you towards the person you want to be, right? And so for me right now, it's more patient with a tiny person. That makes me a better mother. That, to me right now, those 5 minutes outside going, that moves me to be the kind of person I want to be for my son. But it's not binging this and going on a wild that those kinds of acts actually can, sabotage your progress. So I just want to be clear that it's not about any of that self-indulgent extreme. It's about being generous with yourself is what makes you a better person, a happier person, a healthier person, a more whole person. That is truly being generous with yourself.
And you made a clear delineation at the start. Generosity is not about just showering people with gifts. It's actually your presence, your time with someone is the most generous thing that you can ever give. There's no price that you can put on that hour that you spend with your spouse or your loved one. So there's a real difference there between just trying to fill the void with gifts and cash or other material possessions and real time dedicated to someone.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, to me, and I said it and you just reiterate, like, time. There's nothing else in the world that we cannot replace. Everything else you can replace in some way. You can never get back time.
It's a pity we don't realize that earlier. I only realized that when I was in my mid-40s. But it definitely is not a renewable resource.
I am there. And getting back to what I was just saying, like, being in my 40s and having a toddler, it is like it comes crashing down on you really quick, that when something happens, it's like, this will never happen again, right? Like, it's, after this, we'll never go through this again. We'll never have this kind of experience. You'll never want that or need that again. Oh, it's going to make me sad.
I know. I remember being in my early 30s and late 20s, I remember being in places like Nepal, and I was free and single and thinking, oh, I won't do that mountain climb this time. I'll do it next time. Oh, well, if only I could send a message back to myself. You're probably not going to be back there as a single person with enough energy to climb mountains.
I know that exact experience, which is so funny because I have
please.
always called Nepal my home away from home.
Have you?
I've worked there tiny stints of, I call it living there because I'm just there for so long. Like it is such a special place. I love that you brought it up because so few people ever, literally no one ever mentions Nepal.
I loved it.
It is such a special place. Yeah. I wish I could send a note to lots of versions of me in Nepal and say, just be present. Just be so present right now. It's the only place I work. Maybe this is just a me problem, that I gain weight because so much gratitude comes in the form of food. And it's so good. It's like everything in India and China, and you smash it together and then you just eat. At least I do. Oh my God. It's amazing.
It's amazing.
It's truly a magical place.
And for anyone out there who decides to go to local restaurants, it can be quite spicy. So be alert to that. My head was blown off a few times, I have to admit.
True.
Yeah.
Very true.
No, amazing. So you mentioned the work that you've done. Tell me more about being a human rights crusader. I'd love to hear more from your experiences.
Well, I don't think there's anything crusader about it, but so my background is that I'm a doctor of public health, and I started a human rights firm maybe 15 years ago. I don't even want to do the math at this point. But it's a healthcare and a human rights firm. I believe everything is health. I mean, everything we see, touch, feel, it impacts our health in some way, our emotional, mental, physical, social health. You know, we are who we are. We're humans, and we always human. Everything around us influences how we feel and think and behave. So yeah, over the years, I have been really blessed. Most of my work is contract, which as I get older will probably change. The pandemic changed it, having a family changes that. But yeah, certainly in my younger days, it was a lot about going and doing. And so for me, I could have an impact in, a community here. We could build this or improve that. But the truth for me was when there's something devastating that happens, the ability to go and help, that's where my heart and my mind have always really been happy. And not in a way of like dropping in and going, I can fix it and leaving, but in a way of like just being present in the community. Like what are the resources we can use, and or what are resources we have that you don't, that we can provide for you and teach and grow. And that to me, I had mentioned, I wrote my dissertation on how to build public-private partnerships. And to me, that's exactly what it is, right? Because especially when you go to some low resource area, you can bring something that we use for the following thing, right? To build, say, a well, make clean water. But you take that local culture and knowledge and you can give them a specific tool, and all of a sudden it becomes something that you had no idea. Because especially in low resource areas, they do, I would argue, 10 times more with 10 times less. And so when all of a sudden you're given opportunity and resources, they could run circles around us. And so obviously you can just hear it in my voice. Like that's my happy place. Not fixing in a way like I can fix it, but fixing in a way of, the world has a lot of resources. In fact, I don't know when this will come out, but the Olympics are on right now. And I commented last night, we had swimming on in the background, and I was watching these cameras and these things happen. And I was just like, imagine if we took some of this and we focused and harnessed that energy on producing clean water on islands. People don't often think about the fact that islands do not have clean water. Inherently, by being an island, there's no clean water.
Yeah.
Like, imagine if we just took a little bit of what we do for a few weeks of competition and we just used that knowledge and said, how do we help you create a sustainable water supply for your schools, for your whatevers? So that's the work I like to do, which is why I end up working in lots of nonprofits. And yeah, you can hear it. That's my happy place.
I really can. And I think about it often. If we could just get a year of time from people who work in the weapons industry, for example, building sophisticated missiles and so forth, we could build machines that would clean the ocean of plastic in record time.
Absolutely. We could. My latest sort of space I've worked in throughout the pandemic is food security for children. Like, I won't call anyone out by name, but the sheer volume of products that we produce to put on shelves, if we took a tiny bit of that effort and we put it towards nutrition that could survive a wet season, a dry season, which we can, because to your point, like, we can do it with militaries. If we could just do that for schools, imagine the ripple effect. Girls wouldn't be sent home to go work. Like, they wouldn't be married at young ages so that parents didn't have to provide nutrition. Like, kids could just go to school. They wouldn't have to go work in the fields. They wouldn't have to. Like, it's a shame, but it's also, it is what it is, and we have to work with what we've got. Back to the bigger concept here, which is, if we're generous with our time and our knowledge and our resources, we can make a difference. We really can. It can be a small thing. It can be a big thing. We can actually, every single one of us, make a big difference.
For those who have never heard about it, can you describe what a public-private partnership actually is? How does it work?
Well, a lot of times they don't work. But what it is ultimately is it's bigger than what it sounds, but it's what it sounds, right? Which is, you have something that's public. So it could be a government institution. It could be anything in the public sector, and then private. So that could be a business, a university, whatever it is that is private. The greatest examples and longest examples of public-private partnerships actually are roads. It's like, I've got my own trauma from when I wrote my dissertation. I had to dig into roads. It was terrible. I fell asleep constantly reading about roadways. No offense to people who work in transportation, but you think about, to get a road built, everyone uses it, right? So it comes from tax dollars, but you hire companies to get it done, and then we put tolls up so that the money goes to a company, but it also goes to keep the road patched up, to create the systems that allow us to build more roads and bridges that go over it, right? So we can keep traveling. And so what it really is at its core is, it's taking whatever you have from these two worlds that don't often interact in any way, because one is very for-profit and the other is not for-profit in a way, and you bring them together. And so you take the research and the knowledge from, say, the academia. You take the skill sets from the consulting firms. You mentioned the government, military knowledge of whether it's building weapons. You could go to the Microsofts of the world and say, we need your best tech people to build a system that. And then you go to your communities and you say, who are the people doing the work? What does this community need? They need a garden. Okay. Well, how do we get John Deere, I'm just making this up, right? But to come in and provide the equipment to actually till that land, because it's really rocky land. But then how do we get this farming group to do this or whatever? And we're seeing really large scale public-private partnerships these days. In fact, that example I just gave made me think of one in which we have IFAD, so it's the UN's International Food Development, Agriculture. They have a partnership with NASA in which they take, I'm not kidding, like satellites, look down at the ground, and they can tell you which patches of land are the most fertile. And so in some of these really low resource areas, it's like, look, if we're going to give microfinance loans to farmers to try and rebuild, these are actually the plots of land where we can build, a sustainable corn farm. And this one over here can sustain whatever, right? It goes over my head now with agriculture. But the fact that we can use government systems and technology that was built by these private, billion-dollar industries, and use their technology to help local farmers find the best plots of land, and then to say, these wheat harvests do work, these wheat harvests don't work. You can send them off to labs, and those labs can say, these aren't going to grow because of X and Y, these will grow. In fact, you should do more of this and less of this. Those kinds of partnerships are incredible because it takes the knowledge from all the different institutions. It takes some of the money out of the equation of the haves and have-nots, and it allows you to create something that benefits everyone. So food is a great example, and roads are too, right? Because we all use them. It doesn't matter how much you have or don't have, you still have to get there. Food, we all have to eat. Clean water, we all have to drink water, we all need shelter. So these are wonderful spaces to build public-private partnerships.
And where do NGOs or not-for-profits fit in? Are they kind of the interface between the two sometimes, or are they sometimes just on their own mission?
It depends. Some are really good about sitting in the middle. Food security is a space where I have seen that because they get nutrition in whatever form it is. It could be a hot plate, it could be a food pantry with cans of things. It could be nutritional packets like shakes where you get your nutrients and keep moving. So in those cases, nonprofits are sort of all of the above because they work with the companies making the products, they work with the local communities donating. They're there with whether it's your churches or your whatever is doing the handouts. So sometimes they're sort of the center of that hub and wheel structure. Other times they sit very much on their own. It sort of depends, I think, on where. So NGO is non-governmental organization, but I think it sort of depends on where they sit and why they were created. I mean, sometimes they're created for a very specific mission for a very specific group of people, and they don't need anyone else because they are there to be an advocate for this group or provide treatment for that rare disease, whatever it is. So I think that is really how you build it. It's about your mission statement, your purpose, how you build the organization.
Tell me a little bit about the Global Good podcast and the work you're doing there.
It's about to restart. It paused. I did not know how, I envy you. I did not know how hard it was to maintain a good podcast. So the Global Good podcast is exactly what it sounds like. It's based off of my work. And when the pandemic started, a lot of my work came to a halt, but I knew these brilliant, beautiful people all over the world who were doing good work. And most of them are doing such good work. They don't get credit. They don't, nobody writes about them. They're not getting the publicity, etc. And so I just decided to create this space. And my intent in the podcast was that it should not be a listening experience. It should be an action-oriented experience. And so my goal is at the end of each episode, I provide 5 ways to make a difference. And oftentimes one is like, oh, you loved hearing about this nonprofit, you can donate. But a lot of times, I mean, the other links, or all of the links are learn more. You mentioned plastics. I did one on plastics in the ocean, and I didn't even set out to do it. Other than I was just really interested, and someone brought it up, and we were talking about clean water. And it was one of those things where all of a sudden I went down this rabbit hole and I couldn't get out of it. And I went, well, I might as well talk to people about this because I just lost like 2 days of my life. And then I realized there are people to interview, right? Like for me to ask the questions to. So I try to pick a different country. So you get to meet people from all over. So an eye doctor in Rwanda. That one was so fun because I will warn, there are moments I think of each show that are really heavy because what I have found is a lot of people doing the really good work. It comes out of a place where they had no choice. Yeah. And so, post genocide in Rwanda, there was one eye clinic. It's a country. And so for these individuals to become doctors and open vision clinics. I mean, imagine trying to work in a field. Imagine trying to provide for your family you can't see. You have cataracts. You've never had a pair of glasses. I would have nothing. And like I'm proud, my contacts are there. Those simple things can change everything. And so yeah, talking to an eye doctor in Rwanda on how do you build a system? Where'd you get your first pair of glasses? Like those silly questions. We talk about domestic violence. I interviewed a woman in Mexico who, grew up in a family where her mother, when she passed, they actually found, and these reports will come out more in 2025, but her mom, her brain had more CTE than any professional football player, American football. What domestic violence does to the brain is, it's pure trauma. And so to talk about domestic violence and how all these things, we do it through a science lens. Yeah, it's all about doing good. It's global good. And because we're all humans, I've not found any solution that someone poses that literally the rest of us can't do. Because that's the whole point, is if you can do it in these limited resource settings, anyone can go forth and build this thing, or do one of these, or add one of these in their community. It's really about global good.
I love it. Love it. And showcasing those stories can really change lives, because not only do you connect people, they can find a person or an organization that they might actually want to support, i.e. be generous, but it also shows how ingenious we are, the things that we can do despite the odds. And we need more stories like that in the world. 100%. Yeah.
I like that idea of being solution oriented. Exactly what you said. It's not just hearing, oh my gosh, this awful thing happened, or oh my gosh, they don't have that. That's terrible. It's about, no, we're fixing it. We're actively fixing this problem, and if you want to help, you can fix it too.
Exactly. And often they have way less resources. So people sometimes say, I'm stuck. I can't, that fixed mindset. You really can when you see what people do. I grew up in South Africa, actually. And when I see the things, when I go back and see the things people create with so little resources, it blows you away. You go, wow, this is just incredible. And you see struggles, but you also see people flourishing and making the most of it. I'd love to talk about flourishing. There's a concept called eudaimonia, which is, living a good life. The ancient Greeks have been talking about this for thousands of years. Well, they talked about it thousands of years ago. What do you think are some of the elements to a good life? And it struck me earlier when we were talking about generosity that perhaps a little bit of space for introspection and reflection, and maybe even a meditation practice from a neuroscience perspective. I'm pretty sure that gets you out of fight, flight, freeze when you're probably not generous, and into at least a stable foundational state. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on what are some practices that people might take away.
Sure. Well, before I do that, actually, so in the book, it's here.
Yeah.
At the beginning, we have definitions. And so as you said it, it's literally, we define eudaimonic success at the start of the book. And we wrote, the type of happiness, contentment, or success that's achieved through self-actualization and having meaningful purpose in one's life. Being generous fuels eudaimonic success. So we're just like, it's there. I can't fake it. It's the opening of our book. So to answer your question, I mean, I think that's it. To have purpose. That's what we're here for. And you can find that through so many ways. However it is that you give to others and yourself. You mentioned, it can be self-actualization, it can be meditation, it can be 5 minutes outside, it can be whatever it is for you that takes you to that place of contentment, of happiness. In fact, my favorite chapter of the book is one about okayness, which sounds a little silly maybe at the word, but the interview changed my life. And then to write about it was just, to be able to write about something means you have to understand it enough. You can give it back in a meaningful way. And we spoke to this guy named Andy, and I highly encourage everyone to read that chapter, but his life changed when he reached his okayness. And it was that whatever happens around me, I'm okay, because I'm okay with me. I'm okay with my religion, my sexuality, my children, my family dynamics. I can lose my job. We could move. XYZ can happen to me. I'm okay. And I will be okay, and I will find a way. And to work from that place of okayness, I will be okay. No matter what happens around me. I don't describe it nearly as well as he does. But for me, that was, for me, what that eudaimonic success is being okay with me, to me, is the ultimate success. I don't need a metric. I don't need a number. I don't need a follower count. I don't need this or to reach a place where at all times, no matter what's happening, I'm okay with me and who I am and how I come to the world and care for my child. That's success. And then it can take meditation. It can take, some people run, some people, it's whatever it is for you. It's practicing self and other generosity in a way that brings you to where you're okay with yourself no matter what.
I love that. And it's so practical. You're not saying love yourself or, be joyful all the time. It's just be okay. I love that.
Okay. Not every day is going to be great. Not every moment's going to go your way. But to work from a place where you're okay, that's real powerful. That is a place of power.
I see another book in your future just called Okayness. I love it. I love it. For people who would love to get in touch with you, where would you like them to go?
Well, I'm pretty easy to find. Nicole F. Roberts. I say the F because I have the most basic name. So my middle initial at least makes me a little different. Just look up Generosity Wins. If you find the book, find us. And in fact, we have a website, generositywins.us. So .us, generositywins.us. And we have email there. I mean, we check our own email. So you can find me easily on social. You can find us on Google. And you can send us an email on our website. Anything you want. And we love when people share stories. It makes it all worth it, to be honest. People send some pretty incredible emails about, I just wanted you to know that I tried this and here's what happened. And then of course we send them back and forth and I cry and Monty's
I love it. But that's what it's all about, really. As an author, my next book is coming out later this year in November. It's called Start with Values. It's about discovering your values and then trying to create your own. I suppose it's a spiritual practice by living your values each day. And yeah, it's really, it's amazing when people do reconnect and reach out. So to everyone who's listening, please do go and check out the website. The links are in the show notes. Get yourself a copy and send Nicole some feedback, and maybe she'll cry. And hopefully not. Nicole, any final thoughts for those who stuck with us all the way to the end?
Well, thank you. I highly encourage you. It's not about saying go buy the book, but having done the research, it is powerful. Being generous is truly powerful, and I cannot encourage you enough to just start small with daily practices. You will see a difference, I promise. We use superpower as a word for a reason. Being generous truly is a superpower.
Nicole, thank you so much for joining and being so generous with your time. And thank you all, listeners, for sticking with us. We appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next episode.